So for all the talk about reform in Albany, and that dates back actually to before Governor Cuomo even took office, there hasn't been much action yet in the legislature. The Senate Democrats have tried to get the chamber's Republican leadership to host hearings on reform measures, like redistricting, for example, or ethics, only to be shot down every time. So instead, the conference took matters into its own hands today and hosted an interactive public forum. More than 100 people actually watched online, and dozens submitted questions through Twitter or Facebook as advocates made the case for stronger campaign finance laws, mandated disclosure of outside income for state legislators, and other issues. Senator Dan Squardron was one of the organizers of today's forum. He's joining us now with a recap. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So this is actually pretty novel. This is the first ever online forum of this kind. Could you just explain a little bit more about what it is, actually?
Absolutely. In fact, this forum's idea is within the Senate rules. Rule 7 of the Senate rules includes hearings. It also includes these forums. It says anyone can call a forum on an area of relevance to its committee. I'm the Investigations and Government Operations ranking member, so I was able to call the forum. We then decided, look, this is about ethics, it's about reform, so let's make it as transparent as possible. Let's make it truly interactive. So we had any number of different ways, truly multimedia ways, for the public to engage. One was we had a live stream on the web, a lot of different blogs, I believe yours ran it, and along with others.
We did.
And then folks were able to literally ask questions themselves through Twitter, Facebook, Gmail, email, even Google Chat. And we received a whole lot of questions from Ed Koch, from David Grandow, and from lots of citizens across the state.
Now, the reason why this is particularly interesting is because, of course, in the middle of the day, when a lot of these legislative hearings tend to be held, and we should actually note, this is not a hearing because only the majority has the capability of holding hearings. This is a forum.
Right, a Rule 7 forum is what we call it.
Right. So they're a little bit different, and they have a little bit less in terms of a clout, but generally speaking, it gives people an opportunity to sound off. So in the middle of the day, it's tough, right? It almost seems like actually the legislature doesn't want to hear from people when they hold hearings at, like, I don't know, 3 or 9 in the morning when people are working. In this case, if you had a break for lunch, you could actually have signed on and tweeted a question.
That's right. I know that very few people will ever check their Twitter or their Facebook account at work, but for the
we never do that.
for the rare bird that does, they were able to participate. No, I mean, look, it's a good point, and the ideal is, and this is what we did when we were in the majority. We held ethics hearings around the state, both during the day and in the evening, so that folks could participate. This is, as you point out, not a full hearing. It's a Rule 7 forum. We were able to use the Senate rules to do the best we could, since the hearings were rebuffed by the majority, and we did the best we could in terms of interactivity. I have to tell you, this was the first ever of its kind. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know how many people were going to respond, so we're glad that we had the responses we did.
Okay, it was a little bit of a crude situation because A, because you've never had it before, but B, because the Republicans didn't want to help you. So you had like a single video camera that was sort of swooping all over the place, and a microphone. I mean, I would assume it was a little bit challenging because, as I said, the majority wasn't really interested in assisting you.
Jen Krinsky, who works for us, one of my colleagues joked she ran a marathon. She was literally having to move it around. Hopefully the experience for viewers was good enough. They were able to feel like they participated. I mean, look, it would be funny if it wasn't so important. The idea that we were in a hearing room that has the access to the video and all the different ways to get it online, yet we had to do this jerry-rigged system because the majority just doesn't seem interested in having public hearings, a public hearing, whether a forum or any other, on this issue. I mean, it's beyond petty. Unfortunately, it makes it really hard to engage people fully.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, this is two parts. A, and look, I'll be the cynic in the room and the skunk at the garden party. I know that the Democrats tried to use a rules change that was made after the coup in 2009 to force the Republicans to have an actual bona fide hearing on their package of ethics reform proposals. The problem is, though, isn't that really a political move to try and get the Republicans to force them to vote no, and then subsequently you can use it when campaigns roll around to say, look, voters, Republicans are against reform? I
mean, look, Liz, if they vote no, that is an issue, and a significant one. I don't think that asking for a hearing, that hoping that if folks are forced to vote on it, they'll be forced to vote the right way, the way their constituents would want them to, is a cynical political move. I think it's the best possible move for actually moving it forward and making it a reality. I mean, what you describe certainly is probably the political reality. The fact is, folks don't want to vote against independent redistricting. But to me, that doesn't make it cynical. That suggests just how important it is when 54 of 62 senators pledged they would support the issue to force a vote on it, not in order to kill it, but because hopefully when faced with a vote, folks will be forced to vote the right way, and we can actually make it happen, make it a reality.
There is someone who could make this a reality, and his name is Andrew Cuomo. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has someplace in the 70% of approval ratings, and he said he ran on a campaign platform of cleaning up Albany, of bringing the fight to the legislature, and he's been quite successful in terms of getting a budget through. And now he's going to go all around the state and champion ethics reform, a property tax cap, and gay marriage, legalization of that, which is his post-budget priority list. But I mean, we have been hearing a lot about closed-door negotiations on ethics. Why not bring that out into the open? Where's the bill? I mean, then you wouldn't have to be doing any of this.
Well, look, the governor has made clear in his campaign and since he's been elected that ethics is an absolute top priority, and that's a great thing. You know, in the last gubernatorial administration, we passed an ethics bill out of both houses of the legislature. It got vetoed, and then we didn't really hear about ethics again for the rest of the administration. It was a real problem. You know, our ability here is to try to get the Senate to have hearings on it. It's the legislature's role. It's the Senate majority is the one where 54 of 62 senators have signed this pledge. So we're doing what we can in the legislature to make the hearing, to make the issue as public as possible, to create as much of a hearing as possible. I mean, I have to say the governor has been very clear on this. We've had 3 days this week, I think 3 different days he's mentioned this issue.
We have.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, and again, though, you did at one point have control of the chamber, and you had it for 2 years, and you didn't bring this stuff up for a vote. So the Republicans...
Well, ethics we did.
Right, and then subsequently, as you mentioned, Governor Patterson at the time then subsequently vetoed it, he said, because he didn't think it went far enough, and many of the good government advocates actually were quite upset. And so were you, if I remember correctly.
That's right. In fact, we passed that bill with near unanimous support in the Senate, certainly bipartisan support. The first time around, the governor vetoed it. We brought it back for an override of the veto, and the Republicans flipped, and they did not support the override, or we would have had that ethics bill become law. Okay,
but to be fair, though, there are some of these things that you are now pushing that were not in that original bill. For example, revoking the pension benefits for going forward for people who are found guilty of a felony when they are in the capacity of their public job. I mean, that was not in that last ethics bill. So there are some things that you could have done that you didn't do when you were in the majority, but now that you guys are in the minority, I mean, your job is loyal opposition, is it not?
Look, without a doubt, that bill wasn't everything it could have been, or everything that I would have wished it would have been, and I made that clear at the time. What it was a real opportunity to make a difference and get a bill passed, not just put out a press release. And our role now is to push as hard as we can, push for the ideal, for the things that we think need to be in there. I think it's important when we do see a bill that we do have an opportunity to comment on it, to push to improve it a little bit. And look, I think we all know this is the reality is legislation is rarely perfect. I don't expect that we're going to see an absolutely perfect ethics bill. What I'd like to see is a new ethics law that really significantly changes the landscape. And that's how we're going to measure the bill that does come out, and that hopefully comes out, and that hopefully we get to vote on.
I actually watched some of today's forum, and it was fascinating to see people interact in real time, and the ability to do that, which is something that, of course, government hasn't really been able to do in the past. And before we get to the technology of it, I mean, isn't it a little bit preaching to the choir? I mean, you have people there from NYPIRG or from the Brennan Center, from the League of Women Voters. I mean, you guys are all on the same page on these particular propositions.
Right. Well, as I said during the hearing, it's rare that you have people come up and testify against ethics reform. There are some folks who are against it, quite a lot of them in Albany. Unfortunately, they don't come out. It would have been great to have them. I'm not sure who we could have invited to be willing to say that. I think one of the advantages of the interactivity is we actually did get a couple of different perspectives sort of infused into the conversation. I think that was helpful and meaningful. I think the other thing is, even though we've talked about these issues a lot, one thing that came out of the hearing is how fundamental campaign finance reform and campaign finance enforcement is to any ethics reform, right? Ethics reform sometimes gets the headlines because that's the thing that's related to members of the legislature being indicted or going to jail. But fundamentally, as a system, I think every testifier said campaign finance enforcement and reform is just as important, if not more important.
Okay, so when we see this mythical ethics bill and we see what's in there, we will actually have you back, and maybe we can find somebody out there, scare them up somewhere, who is willing to debate the relative merits against the mom and apple pie side, but we shall see. In the meantime, I want to thank you, Senator Dan Squardron, for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. I'll look forward to it.